Is this wall evidence of a lost civilization in North America? Is it evidence of ancient architecture never before discovered in the United States? Some believe it is. It's known as the Sage Wall, and it's located in the Rocky Mountains of Montana. It's quickly gaining recognition, with YouTube accounts and popular media personalities like Joe Rogan commenting on it. But it's not just another online conspiracy theory. It's gaining attention from professionals across the world, and in fact, a significant scientific investigation into this site was just completed. The results are still pending. The question everyone is asking is this just a natural, albeit bizarre, geologic formation, or is it a complex, human-engineered phenomenon with connections to other ancient structures throughout the world? The answer to this question could rewrite history as we know it. That's where I come in. I'm no professional, but when I first saw pictures of this site months ago, it immediately reminded me of some strange geologic areas I have encountered in my travels. Maybe the Sage Wall was just another one of those. Or maybe it was far, far more significant. I knew I had to see it for myself. So my wife and I set out to explore the Sage Wall and these other mysterious sites in an attempt to contribute to this ongoing search for the truth. This video is documentation of what we found. Hey everybody, it's Andrew.
And Evelyn.
With Desert Drifter. Thanks for tuning in. All right, we are heading towards this wall. I really have no idea what to expect up here. This site sits on private property. The land is owned by Chris and Linda, both wonderful people. They had owned the land for years before they stumbled upon the formation, now known as the Sage Wall, in 1996. They thought it interesting, but didn't fully grasp its significance at the time. When they found it, it was buried under deadfall from dozens of pine trees. Word of this formation has slowly gotten out, and here we are today. Here it is. Wow. Very interesting. Wow. Trying to take the whole thing in. So you'll see this little like rope fence down here. They just don't want people pulling on the wall or touching it. As visitation is increasing, the landowners are having to balance public access along with protection of the actual site. I'm here kind of trying to take it all in myself, as well as think about what kind of shots do I want to get, what do I want to show you guys. I think my overall strategy for this place is to try to get as much interesting footage as I can. Obviously do some narration, but I really want to allow you guys to draw your own conclusions, sort of see it firsthand like I'm doing today. Now I will say one of the things that immediately jumps out to me is this 90-degree angle over here. That is certainly a unique split there. Now one of the things I was most curious about seeing in person involve these crack systems through here. Now as a climber, crack systems in rocks are pretty familiar. You get used to looking at how wide they are and determining what kind of gear you could place in it to protect yourself. Many of the crack systems are quite wide, pretty common to what I would see at any rock climbing area. But there are some, like this one down here, that are incredibly tight-fitting, I have to say. Some of the ancient walls that have been documented in the world are so tight-fitting that they confound us even today. Now, I'm not saying that a wide crack definitively means it's natural, but tight-fitting blocks would certainly provide compelling evidence that the Sage Wall was human-engineered. This is another thing kind of interesting. You know, it looks like there's a big block, big chunk missing out of the wall up here. Now, where this chunk ended up, you know, is it one of these rocks down here that's now just buried under soil? You know, it's hard to say. This is a good opportunity to note that significant amounts of this wall could still be buried. As it is today on the property, the formation runs about 275 feet long and is 24 feet high at the tallest point. Initial ground penetrating estimates are that the wall could stand another 10 to 15 feet higher if it was excavated. The largest block in the wall has been estimated at 100 tons. If that's accurate, that would make it larger than any stone in the Great Pyramids. What's that, Evelyn?
This is kind of an interesting feature here.
You're right, I haven't really taken that in. So this seems like it would be another 90-degree angle. Obviously, there's a chunk that is broken off here. But again, just like the other one down there, it's kind of an uncanny 90 degrees, huh? So we've done our first sort of quick initial pass through of the wall, but now I want to head up on top of it and take a look at it from the top and also see what else might be up here. So the wall more or less sort of begins here, and this is the back side of it. You can see Evelyn up there. So the first thing that really stands out to me when I look at this backside is just how much less uniform it is. You know, the placements seem more erratic. There's not really a clear straight line like there is on the front side. Now, one thing I do notice on this back side that I didn't on the front side are these sort of knobs here. This one up here is particularly large. You can see my hand next to it for scale. The reason I point these out is because they are a feature found on many ancient walls worldwide. Here's an example from an Incan wall in Peru. Now, what purpose they served for the ancient builders, nobody really knows. The question then is, are these rock nubs on the sage wall evidence of similar human engineering? Or could they be caused from erosion, as softer rock eroded around a harder geologic intrusion? Now, something some people have noted about this site is there's a very high concentration of some kind of metal in these rocks, and that's evidenced by, you know, a magnet sticking to those rocks. So Evelyn's going to do the honors. So we brought a little magnet with us. Here, let me flip it around. Okay, you want to do the honors, Evelyn?
Yes, I do.
Interesting. So there you have it. I'm curious, if we move this to different places, what happens? Oh, it still sticks there. How about this backside?
Is it?
Or is it just stuck on that knob? Let's see.
Oh,
yeah.
It seems like a little less maybe there.
Mm-hmm. Now let's keep moving it to this back side of the wall.
Oh my goodness.
Huh. So seems like throughout most of this rock, there's quite a bit of magnetic pull.
Let's try more.
Here, let's try this one over here. We're actually at this big notch that I pointed out down below, where I said, you know, it looks like maybe some big block has fallen out of there. Is that sticking?
Yeah. That almost sounds hollow.
Now I'm curious, if we take this, you know, how much of the wall exhibits those characteristics. Like, Let's come down to this next block. Yeah, still sticking, it seems. Now you might be watching this and saying to yourself that magnetic pole has no connection to a structure being man-made or not. You aren't wrong. Having minerals and metals in rocks is nothing uncommon. After all, there's a thing called mining, where we get the things we want out of rocks. But let's use this as a chance to talk a little bit about the rock that makes up the Sage Wall and the surrounding area. This part of Montana is known as the Boulder Batholith. The rock exposed at the surface is granite, believed by geologists to be 75 million years old. Rock, and the specific type of granite, is not confined to the Sage Wall. It's scattered around the landscape for miles. I think that's important to emphasize, because otherwise you might have the impression that this wall rises up out of nowhere, that it's the only rock around for miles. But that's definitely not the case. This is drone footage of the surrounding area, and you can see how much of this granite is here. So why are we talking about the whole magnetic thing? Well, they have done rock composition analysis here, and the results turned up trace amounts of iron, magnetite, and a few lesser minerals. Some believe that the trace amounts of these minerals doesn't coincide with the amount of magnetic pole the wall exhibits. This adds to the mystery of the place. Does it have any significance? It depends who you ask. So over on these two boulders is certainly one of the more intriguing aspects of it. You've got almost this like flat platform here. If you can see that. It's covered up now with lichen and whatnot, but you can still see the surface of that rock and how flat it is. It certainly looks like it was cut, or quarried in some kind of way. This is the best example of that. You see it a little bit in this boulder next to it, but other than that, I don't really see it anywhere else on the wall. Is that another geologic feature or evidence of human interaction with this rock long, long ago? Now for me, one of the most intriguing features is how straight this is. I've seen a lot of rock formations in my day, but I gotta be honest, how straight this thing is certainly very unique. So I'm standing about flush with the wall, and I've played around with my camera aperture settings to try and get as much of the wall in focus as possible, because I'm trying to give you guys an idea of just how straight this thing is. It's honestly pretty much dead straight until right there towards the end of the wall. The piece I just noted is this right here. The wall would run perfectly straight for even longer if it wasn't for this chunk that is broken off and is slowly being forced out. The drone probably does the best job of showing the linear nature of the wall. So let's take a look at that. One of the theories that I'm personally pretty interested in exploring today is whether or not this was a geologic, a mostly natural geologic feature that has perhaps been altered in some smaller ways by human hands over the course of time. This line of reasoning would say that this geologic feature was already in place, and then it was recognized by ancient peoples, given significance, and then modified in some smaller ways. Possibly to make it appear more straight, or by carving various features onto it. What might have been so interesting about this place to ancient people? One possibility is its alignment to astronomical events. The field of archaeoastronomy is certainly gaining more recognition in the 21st century as we realize how connected people were to the heavens. Before I visited, I heard that this wall was aligned with the sunrise of the winter solstice. I thought that was a big claim, and there was no evidence given for it, so I wanted to figure out the wall's orientation in person. I put the drone up and got out my phone with the GPS app I use. I oriented myself to the north and then aligned the drone. The wall runs roughly southeast to northwest. I've got to be honest, this is where things get a little spooky. I pulled up the sunrise direction for the winter solstice for this part of Montana. It's 124 degrees southeast. Here it is lined up. I thought it would be in the ballpark, but not nearly a perfect match. It got me thinking. Could the other side of the wall also be in alignment? I pulled up the sunset direction for the summer solstice. It's 306 degrees northwest. Now I admit, I haven't done a perfect scientific experiment here, but it's pretty bizarre, huh? To draw any definite conclusion, you would need to observe the actual solstice events unfolding. Perhaps a snowshoe trip on December 21st is in store for me. So there's a channel of sorts that kind of runs between this wall, the main wall on the left. What the landowner was just telling me, some people theorize that this over here is the remnants of another wall that, because of an earthquake or some other event has just fallen down. Probably the best place that you might be able to envision that is this big chunk of rock here. I mean, talking about those nodules or knobs, there's honestly more of them on this formation than the wall itself. There's Evelyn next to it for scale. It's not quite as tall as the main wall, but again, if that was a wall that had fallen down, or perhaps more of it is buried underneath here, the height that we see right now isn't necessarily that relevant. Over on this side, you see more of the nods, and there's also a lot more well-defined cup marks here. So we haven't talked about these cup marks yet. This is another feature that resembles markings found at other ancient sites. What purpose they served, no one has a definite answer. Are the ones here, at the Sage Wall, natural or man-made? The landowner Chris was telling me that pretty recently he uncovered this. This was covered up with sort of pine duff and soil sticks and whatnot. So looking at this, I mean, it's not very smooth. Like you've got little sort of granite nubs here, little crystals and whatnot. The most obvious portion of the wall is right here, but the landowner was telling me that it actually continues on quite a bit further. It's just, hasn't been cleared out. There's tons of deadfall. It's buried under soil and pine duff. But it's interesting and important to remember that, what we're seeing with our naked eye isn't necessarily everything that's here. So there's the wall. If there was a second wall, it would be just off here, short ways away from me, running up along there. You can see, there's definitely a lot of rocks, some more block-like looking ones. I'll go walk over to those. And over here, it's generally what we might just call a rock garden, you know, big boulders all tumbled up on each other. There's all this deadfall here from dead pine trees that's really choked most of this up here. So when I first saw pictures and video of the Sage Wall, the thing that immediately jumped in my mind was another spot over in eastern Wyoming, also full of granite, also full of strange formations. So I knew that when I was planning this trip, not only would I have to come and see the Sage Wall for myself, but I would also have to pay a visit to the spot over in eastern Wyoming and see, can I find similar features there that I found here at Sage Wall? And if so, how would that influence my interpretation and possibly yours of what we've seen here at the Sage Wall?
Before we leave here, let me say that if you want to see the Sage Wall in person, it's by appointment only, so you must email the Sage Mountain Center first. I'll put a link to their site below. Please remember, this is their home. They have already had random helicopters buzzing their house and strangers showing up in the middle of the night. Let's not forget to respect their privacy and time as they adapt to the sudden attention the wall is bringing.
So let's jump in the car, drive a few hundred miles, take a look. So our main mission today is to check out this spot and see, can we find the same types of features and characteristics that we saw at the Sage Wall here hundreds of miles away.
The question I'm hoping to shed some light on today is, how unique are the features found on Sage Wall? While researching, I saw some sweeping assumptions and analysis of Sage Wall as basic as, granite doesn't naturally do these things, but with no evidence or further explanation given. So is it really that simple? I've seen rocks and the forces of erosion create some pretty bizarre things. So we're going to take a closer look.
What you got there, Evelyn?
There's just a giant hole in this rock.
Yeah, and there was some rain last night, so it's collected some water. Let's give you guys an idea. I mean, this place is just littered with odd rock formations, balanced boulders. I mean, it's just a strange geologic place. Can you get up there, Evelyn?
I think I could.
Climbing in a skirt.
It's a sports skirt.
How's it look up there?
It's cool. It's a really big one.
Huh. All right. Can I pass this to you?
Actually, I think there might be another up there.
This one's getting closer to sort of a clear circle. There's one back there I wanna look at. I do find it interesting that even though this is covered by an overhang, you know, it's still eroding in this circular pattern. So over here on this side, you know, you've kind of got these eroded divots in the side. Definitely not perfectly circular, but
Interesting.
yeah, interesting.
We started seeing more and more of these cup mark-like features. Some big, some small. Here, the local term for them is solution pans, and they're formed through freeze-thaw cycles as water collects in these impressions. With it raining the night prior, we have a great visual for how that might happen. Over time, they deepen and widen. In examining them, I saw no difference between these and those at the Sage Wall. So this is a popular climbing area, and there's actually a climber up on one of those rocks. But this is known as the potato chip area because of that. I'm going to get the drone up and we'll take a closer look at it. Like the Sage Wall, the rock here is granite, also from a feature known as a batholith. This one is called the Sherman batholith. But it's not a perfect apples to apples comparison, I get that. This granite is much, much older than the Sage Wall, dated at 1.4 billion years old versus the 75 million of the wall. But we're still getting to see what granite and the forces of erosion can create. So we just saw this. I mean, it's like such a smaller scale than the Sage Wall, but it's got that same, kind of seemingly too straight to be natural look to it. And yet, I believe it is natural. We continued hiking through this maze of granite, encountering strange features and walls along the way. Notice all the nods in this area. They are literally covering the rocks. Just like the cut marks, there was a plethora of them here, and they don't appear any different to me than the ones on the Sage Wall. But maybe you're like me, and the nods and the cut marks were never that convincing in the first place. What about the linear nature of the Sage Wall? That is unique, and we didn't see anything like it here. But there's one more area to consider. I preface this by saying, I don't know much about this last spot. It wasn't even going to be featured. It sits off a highway in Wyoming, about midway between the two spots. I've driven by it any number of times and thought it was cool, but all of a sudden, I looked at it with different eyes. I couldn't find anything about it online, or even a name for the formation. What I do know is it's massive. Pay attention to the semi-trucks driving by, and you'll get a sense of scale. The way the rock has fractured in blocks, and along a very straight, relatively clean line, is very impressive. You can probably imagine why it caught my eye. Again, rock and erosion do some wild things. But does that explain the Sage Wall? I certainly think some of what we see is natural. But if it were the remnants of an undiscovered civilization, many tens of thousands of years old, would the erosional forces working against it in that time make it appear more natural than it really is? I still have many questions, and I eagerly await the results of the latest scientific investigation. But enough of my observations. What do you think?
Is it natural or man-made? If you want more Desert Drifter, exclusive content, giveaways, and unique community, consider checking out my new Patreon page. My hope is that through avenues like this, it will open the opportunities for me to explore further into more unique and remote places.